Hey guys, it's Dr. Justin Marchegiani here. Happy Friday. Hope you all are having a phenomenal week. Let's dig in. What's cooking on the functional medicine side here for y'all here this morning? First question of the day. If the GI map, adrenals, and organics tests are all fine and the diet's on point, yet the patient is still feeling fatigued and brain fog, what do you look at from there? So if gut infections are clear, so if we're having good digestion, we're eating food, we're feeling good after food, we're breaking food down, we're looking at food in the stool, we're looking at our stool and we're not seeing any undigested particles in the stool is sinking, it's a really good sign. Number two is, how did the adrenals look prior? Have the adrenals been retested? So if the adrenals have been retested and look great, that's a good sign. We can at least cross that off. If it hasn't been retested, well, that's something that should be done at some point. The organic acids, they all look fine. It depends. If there's been issues to begin with mitochondria or B vitamins or any gut stuff, and the retest has improved it, that's great. If the adrenals and the organics have all looked fine to begin with, I think the next question would be, how does the thyroid look? Have to really look at the thyroid function, make sure it's in the top 25% of the reference range or so for T3 free in total. And then the X factor after that would be other potential stealthy infections like Lyme or other types of co-infections that may be, let's just say, stimulating the immune system. After that, I run a nice comprehensive blood test, CC, comprehensive metabolic panel, rule out anemia, make sure protein levels look good, and maybe even a Nutri-Eval or a intercellular nutrient panel just to make sure all the nutrients look good. And then, of course, diet, lifestyle, and sleep are essential. So I always start with the foundations. I think the foundations are very important. You can't ignore the foundations. If we're not digesting and absorbing and assimilating food properly, that's going to be a concern. If we're not sleeping well, that's going to be a concern. If we're seeing a lot of undigested particles in the stool, that can also be a concern. And if we skipping meals during the day, the diet isn't on point, it's not super anti-inflammatory, nutrient dense, and low in toxins, that could always potentially be an issue. Awesome. Any questions, feel free and keep them chiming in. I got a patient I got to jump to in a few minutes, but I wanted to just jump on here real quick to see if I could help some people out here this morning. Danielle writes in, hi from Sweden. I take 1.5 grams of vitamin C daily. Is that enough for health? I use perk buffered ascorbate powder. Yep, that's fine. I make a gram of vitamin C a day. It's great. If you're under a lot more stress, you can always go up to 2 or 3 grams a day. There's a couple markers on the organic acids. One's called 8-hydroxy-2-deoxyguanosine. It's a marker that looks at oxidative stress. So when you're under more stress, oxidation happens. Okay? Oxidation is when you lose electrons. That process of losing electrons actually creates DNA damage. So it's kind of like you leave a nail outside, it gets rusty, or you cut open an apple on your table and it gets brown, right? The oxidation process is that browning process. Now in our body, we use antioxidants, which they give up an electron to stable the lost electron that's happening in the oxidation. And that prevents the browning or the rusting, essentially. So we don't have a whole bunch of, well, we could have a whole bunch of internal rusting if we don't have good antioxidant reserves. So taking vitamin C like that or really good antioxidants can also be very helpful. Vince writes in, could you explain histamines and what we should be concerned about regarding them? So histamines are like, they may not be the cause, they may be an effect. The more your gut's inflamed, the poorer your digestion is, the more chronic infections you have, histamine foods may be an issue at some point. Higher histamine foods obviously could be aged meats, they could be citrus, they could be chocolate, they could be coffee. I have a whole list on my website, but they may be an issue. You may notice migraines, headaches, dizziness, vertigo, brain fog, so if you're, and then also fermented foods too. So if you're noticing those foods, there's a chronic pattern. Let's say you're already paleo or autoimmune paleo, but you're having some fermented foods, you're having maybe some citrus foods, maybe you're having some aged meats, and you're noticing a pattern, even though your diet's clean with some of these higher histamine foods, you may want to cut them out and see what happens. Now, if we get to the underlying issue of why the gut's inflamed, infections, poor digestion, poor enzyme levels, we support like B vitamins. B6 is really important for creating enzymes that degranulate histamine. So if we fix the nutrient deficiencies, if we fix the diet, we fix the inflammation in the guts, we get digestion better, we get the infections better, histamine at some point should get better and improve. It's an effect, not necessarily the cause, but in the process, some people may have to really cut down on those histamine higher histamine foods. There's also histamine blocking foods like coffee and teas, green and black teas block histamine metabolism. And there's histamine releasing foods, which are kind of similar. Grains are in that camp too. Vivek writes in, does exercise stimulate the parasympathetic or sympathetic nervous system? What role does exercise play in digestion? Exercise does stimulate the sympathetic nervous system if it's like an intense type of movement. If it's something like sprinting or lifting weights, which is good, right? Because there's, the whole idea is you can mobilize a whole bunch of carbohydrate and glucose, or any extra sugar that's hanging out in your muscles, you can burn it up. When your muscles burn up that extra glycogen, it can soak up any extra sugar hanging out in your bloodstream, which is great. So maybe if you ate some extra carbs, you can soak up those extra carbohydrates hanging out in your bloodstream. It's kind of like if your kid makes a whole mess on your table, if you got a small little brawny paper towel, you may not be able to absorb as much as like a really big, huge, porous cotton towel, right? You can really absorb everything. So think of your muscles as kind of like that, soaking up blood sugar. But again, it's a balance there. So you have to make sure you leave the exercise feeling better than when you started. You have to make sure you can emotionally repeat the movements again. And you have to make sure later on that day or that next morning when you wake up, you don't feel beaten up. There's a balance there. You have to make sure, okay, you have a stress, but can you activate the parasympathetics and recover beyond that stress that was put in? If not, then you got to just cut down the frequency, intensity, or duration, move to things more like walking or yoga or Tai Chi, things that are more restorative, or just cut down the frequency, how many times you exercise a week, the duration, how long your exercise is, and then the intensity, which could just mean giving yourself more time in between your sets. Okay, here, next question here. Is organic soy okay to consume? Feel fatigued the next day after having it? I would stay away from soy in general. Now, if it's a fermented soy like a miso, natto, or tempeh, and you want to do it every now and then, maybe you go to sushi with your family once a week, once a month or something like that, not a big deal. Try to do a tamare soy sauce, though, because a lot of soy tends to be loaded with gluten if it's a soy sauce, and it is estrogenic. So if you're a guy, that's a no-no on that side of the fence. T-Time writes in, I'm thin, but my stomach sticks out from my rib cage to 2 inches below the belly button. It's a hard feeling, can bloat more by night with veg intake. What's causing this? Could be bacterial overgrowth. You may want to look at cutting down FODMAPs and adding in some stomach acid and enzymes as well. Let me head over to Facebook real quick. See here, no major questions there. If you guys on Facebook want to get some questions answered, the YouTube's a better way to do it. You can still chime in on Facebook, but head over to justinhealth.com/YouTube to subscribe. Oliver writes in, on my stool test, my fecal fats were high, but my long-chain fatty acids were also high. Does that mean I'm not absorbing them properly? More than likely. That's what it sounds like. Probably some stress in the gut, maybe lower stomach acid and enzyme levels. Dr. J, what's the big difference between a paleo template and a ketogenic diet plan? They're basically one of the same, right? A paleo template is a template where your macronutrients can be adjusted up or down. Now, what's your template where you're just cutting down the carbohydrates typically to 10%? You're upping the protein somewhere between 60 to 70%, maybe even 75%. And then the protein, so recap, 10% on the carbs, 60 to 75% on the fats, and the proteins will stay somewhere between 15 to 25% on average. The only difference is on a keto template, a lot of dairy may be allowed. So a lot of people I see derail themselves on keto because they're doing a whole bunch of cheese or dairy, and there may be some allergenicity to it. So some people benefit on the keto paleo because they're cutting out a lot of the dairy, which can make a big difference. Primal Genes writes in, why is DHEA and pregnenolone hormone so important before starting a pathogen cleanse? Because a lot of people that have a lot of gut issues to begin with tend to have a lot of gut inflammation. And going and killing it, knocking out infections can actually be stressful on the body. Chronically sick or have chronic health issues, they tend to also be overly inflamed and not quite have the capacity to regulate inflammation pathways in their body. So we like to prime up their ability, one, to absorb nutrition better, which helps, get their diet on track, get their digestion moving in the right direction, which helps, because not digesting even healthy foods can be a stressor on your body. And then really supporting your body's anti-inflammatory pathways so you can regulate inflammation via your natural anti-inflammatory system, your adrenal glands. That makes a huge difference. Then you have the right start going. So then if you start create inflammation in the killing process, we can kind of calibrate the dosing, add in some binders, add in things like ginger tea, your healing nutrients for the gut lining, restore, and then work the dose up. And then your detoxification, your lymphatic, and your immune system won't be as overwhelmed with all the excess inflammation. Again, I've been doing this a long time, so that's the biggest pushback. Lots of people, once they find out they have a gut infection, they're like, I want to kill it now. It's kind of like, I could imagine if you went to your doctor and you found out you had strep throat, it's like, give me antibiotics now, right? I don't want to wait. So that's kind of the mindset, but it's a little bit different here. Uric acid, where'd it go? Lots of questions coming in here too fast for me to handle. Hold on. All right, uric acid score of 7.1 cause bilateral knee pain stiffness. Maybe, I forget the reference range. I think it's what, 3 to 5, 3 to 5.5. So if it's outside of the reference range or in the top 10, 20%, it's very possible. Lots of uric acid's primarily going to happen from the excess fructose. How about on low BP on keto? So bulletproof, yeah, bulletproof's kind of the same thing. It's cutting out a lot of the anti-inflammatory foods. Bulletproof tends to be naturally keto anyway. How does one reduce coronary calcium score? Cut out inflammation in the body. So one, get your carbohydrates down to what you need, and then reduce the inflammation, cutting out grains, legumes, dairy, emphasizing high quality saturated fats, great omega-3s, more non-starchy vegetables, and keep the carbs to what you need. Tea Time writes in, so you don't think I should go to a gastro doctor then? Enzymes don't seem to work for me. What was your question before? I can't go back. Let me see if I can go back. Yeah, I think you need to go and you need to get your gut assessed and looked at. I'll go on my site, justinhealth.com/shop, and get the GI map test and start with some diet and lifestyle changes. If you need to reach out to me directly, you can over there as well. Okay, here, Oliver writes in your opinion, are non-organic berries worth eating? They are heavily sprayed. Everything else I eat is organic, but can't get organic berries. Well, I would look at doing the Clean 15. Those are the foods that have the lowest pesticide residue. So if you can't get organic, I would at least do the Clean 15 list. So I'm going to Google that here now for y'all. The Clean 15 is going to be avocado, sweet corn, pineapple, cabbage, onion, peas, papayas, asparagus, and then there's the dirty dozen. So I would just say if you can't get organic, I would at least look at avoiding the dirty dozen and doing the Clean 15. All right, so let me just read the dirty dozen here. Strawberries, spinach, nectarines, apples, grapes, peaches, cherries, pears, tomatoes, celery, sweet potatoes, bell peppers. So strawberries are on the dirty dozen list, but blueberries and raspberries aren't. So I would say if you can't get organic, do the blueberries or raspberries. And I think you'd be pretty much okay with that. Sometimes you got to do your best. Every now, if you're on track and your health's pretty good and it's like you're really craving some blueberries and you can't access it, just do your best. Okay, cool. James writes in, any big wins for me lately? All is well. My biggest thing, I just try to get to bed at a reasonable hour, get 8 hours sleep, do all my good diet and lifestyle things, try to get a little Tabata workout in, get my 10 to 15,000 steps a day, and I'm good. Thanks for asking. Ali Mo writes in, BP average is 87/42. That's super low. Probably massive adrenal issues, maybe some very low minerals. Need to get that fixed for sure. What's the best way to increase calcium? My blood work shows it's low. So if that's blood calcium, what is that marker? Like something below 9 on the calcium blood test, calcium serum. I would just make sure you're doing lots of green vegetables, good healthy fats and proteins. Salmon with the bones is another great way to do it. Ensure you're getting 1 gram of calcium per day. Run your foods through Chronometer to ensure you're getting it. A couple hundred, like my multi-pack. This bigger one, this bigger white one right there, that's a calcium malate. I do a couple 100 milligrams a day on that, plus a really good diet just to fill in the gaps. The other one's a magnesium. The smaller one's a magnesium. So calcium, magnesium is great. Been on GI Clear 125. I feel good. No die-off reaction, no bloating, killing the H. pylori with just your products. They have no chance against the GI protocol. Good. Awesome. Glad you're doing well with that, James. That's exactly what's happened to me. Did keto, lost 50 pounds, but was eating lots of dairy and ended up finding out through a stool test, an allergy test, that I have a casein intolerance. I see that all the time with people. There's a couple of prominent people out there that I like. I won't call them out directly, but there's a lot of people in the keto community that I see their post, and they're doing a keto template, but they do so much dairy, And I'm afraid that that's driving a lot of inflammation. Even though their carbs look good, their inflammation may be higher because they're doing too much of that. So it's something to keep in mind. If you are going keto, be very careful with the dairy. You may be okay with some ghee. You may be okay with some butter. Why? Because the casein in that is lower and it's more just fat. As soon as you go into cheese and yogurts, you get a lot more of the casein protein, which could be inflammatory for some. Noah writes in, Dr. J, what do you think about the common theory that thyroid problems often indicate a high level of hydrogen peroxide in the body and the need for catalase and glutathione? Well, if your thyroid's autoimmune in nature, hydrogen peroxide does happen as part of the autoimmune reaction. When when the iodination process happens and tyrosine is binded to thyroglobulin to make thyroid hormone, there is a byproduct of hydrogen peroxide. Now, adequate selenium will help take that hydrogen peroxide that cleaves an oxygen molecule off of it and turns it into H2O, right? Hydrogen peroxide is H2O2. You pull one oxygen off of that, now it's H2O, which is water, which is benign. But glutathione definitely can be helpful if there's a lot of autoimmunity. It can help modulate the immune system for sure. Oliver writes in, got lots of woozing in my ears and ringing. Doctor says it's wax, ear infection, but could it be hormones or gut? Potentially. Food allergens, gluten, dairy could be one of the biggest things driving that. So always look at the foods. If it just started recently, look at the foods first. Can candida cause burning sensation under my skin? Potentially. Yep, other gut stuff could. IKO writes in, caused a very high zonulin score. So yeah, high zonulin means gut permeability. So if you have high gut permeability, it could be caused by infection, stress, poor digestion. Obviously, things like gluten can easily drive it, and that means the things in your gut could be floating into your bloodstream, which could be revving up your immune system for sure. Alamo writes in, thanks, but how do the adrenals affect blood pressure? How can I fix it? Your adrenals produce a mineral corticoid called aldosterone. Aldosterone helps hold on to minerals. The weaker your adrenals are, the more you let go of minerals. Water tends to follow minerals. So if your minerals are low, water's low. If water drops down, the overall pressure in the hose, i.e. your blood vessels, drop down. And if you don't have enough pressure, you can't perfuse oxygen via blood to your brain as fast. So it's important to have adequate blood pressure. Michelle writes in, adrenals might need more sodium, which can help also BP. Yeah, I mean, sodium, right? But not just sodium. You want to do sodium with chloride to do like a real salt kind of mix that has all the minerals in it as well. Donna writes in, like your discussion on oxidative stress and inflammation, I find benefits with adding redox signaling and adding more water, half my body weight. Yep, I think that's great. Anything you can do to help with the body's ability to gain electrons through the loss of electrons, whether it's antioxidants or another redox compound. Redox just means an increase in electrons. In school, they teach you oil rig. Oxidation is loss, OIL, and then reduction is gain. That's how you remember it, because it's weird. Like reduction is a gain, that's reducing is dropping, but it's a gain. So that's how you remember that with that mnemonic device. It can be a little confusing. Vivek writes in, protein indigestion due to H. pylori can cause weight loss. Yeah, malabsorption for sure can definitely drive weight loss. James writes in, when are you going to give away free test kits and stuff them to your favorite patients? I think we will be giving away a couple of kits on the Thyroid Summit. So make sure you take a look at the Thyroid Reset Summit, thyroidresetsummit.com. I think we're moving it to January 14th. Need more time to get all my interviews done, just too busy seeing patients. A lot of people that do summits, that's all they do. They're not clinicians. So I need a little bit more time to get my interviews done. So January 14th, subscribe at thyroidresetsummit.com, and you guys are going to get a ton of phenomenal information there. Michelle writes in, a good electrolyte powder with proper minerals, like Dr. J said. A good one out there is Endure. Endure is a great one. That's great. Oscar writes in, can you talk more about growth hormone, circadian rhythm, and weight loss? Growth hormone tends to go up at night, 10 p.m. to 2 a.m. Get to sleep on time. One of the growth hormone suppression tests is they actually give you glucose and they watch your growth hormone drop. What does that mean? Don't do too much carbohydrates. Dial in your carbohydrates for what you need and what your exercise is. All right, y'all, I got to jump on a patient call here. It's been phenomenal chatting with you. You guys have a phenomenal